Hey y'all, it's Miss A. Today we're going to be continuing our notes for equivalent expressions. We started yesterday with order of operations, talking about gems, groupings, exponents, multiplication and division, and then addition and subtraction. And always making sure we follow the order of operations so we make sure we get the correct answer in the end. Today we are going to be looking at the properties. And we've been a while since we talked about these. But the properties that we're going to be looking at are commutative, associative, identity, inverse, multiplicative of zero, and then distributive property. And then we're very briefly going to touch prime factorization because in your activity today, you're going to see some prime factorization questions, so we need to review that as well. So this is kind of a mixture. All right, so the first property is commutative property. Commutative property is when the numbers change order. So they just flip back and forth. Now this applies to addition and multiplication only. None of these apply to subtraction or division. Only addition and multiplication. So the commutative property means you can flip them back and forth and still get the same answer. A plus B is the same thing as B plus A. Same thing for multiplying. A times B will be the same as B times A. That is commutative property. Commutative property is the numbers move. All right, associative property says parentheses around groupings will change. So the parentheses change. Up here, the numbers changed order, but here the parentheses are going to change. So you can see here, again, they just use variables, they don't use numbers, but A plus B plus C, if we were to group A and B, we would get the same answer if we just decided to group B and C instead and then add A. Okay, let's put a number with that to help make sense. So 1 plus 2, 1 plus 2 plus 3, but group these. Sorry, it's kind of small. So if I were to add these two, I would get 3, and then add 3 to get 6. If I were to add these two, I would get 5, and then add 1, I would still get 6. So the same answer in the end, I just group different numbers. So the parentheses change, or I like to say the parentheses move. Like I said up here, the numbers move or the parentheses move, sorry. Either one. All right, same thing for multiplication. I have A times B times C. If I group the A and the B and then multiply that product by C, I'll get the same answer that I would get if I multiplied the B and the C and then multiplied that product by A. It doesn't matter. The parentheses moving doesn't change the value. All right, identity property. Identity property doesn't change the identity of the number. So the identity is who you are, so it doesn't change the number itself. So the addition property for identity is adding 0, because adding 0 does not change the number. And then for multiplication, the identity property is multiplying by 1, because when you multiply by 1, it doesn't change the number. So the addition property of identity is adding 0, and the multiplication property of the identity property is multiplying by 1. Inverse is simply the opposite or the reciprocal. So 5, if we were to add the opposite, we would add -5, and then we would get 0 as an answer. And then for multiplying, we multiply by the flip, the reciprocal. So the reciprocal of 5 would be 1/5, and when we multiply that, we actually get 1. So for the inverse property for addition, the total is 0, and then for the inverse property of multiplication, it equals 1. And then multiplicative of 0, there's no additive, obviously, because it's multiplicative. That is just anything times 0 is 0. And the last one is distributive property. Distributive property is when you distribute or give the number that's outside the parentheses to everything inside of the parentheses. And when we distribute, we multiply. So 6 times A is 6A. They're touching, it means multiply. Then we add, because it says to add, then multiply 6 times 2 to get 12. So we multiply 6 times A to get 6A, then multiply 6 times 2 to get 12, and that's the distributive property. All right, down here we are going to name the properties shown by each statement. All right, so on number 1, we've got 17 plus 22 is equal to 22 plus 17. So notice the only thing that changed was the numbers changed orders. The numbers flip-flopped. So when the numbers move, that is commutative. commutative property. All right, same thing here. We've got 12 times 46 is equal to 46 times 12. Again, the numbers just moved around, so that is commutative as well. Sorry, writing kind of sloppy, trying to write fast. Doesn't take too long. All right, this one right here where it says 89 plus 0 equals 89. The identity of the number stayed exactly the same. Adding 0 didn't change the value. So when you add 0, that is the identity property. (89) times 1 is still 89. Again, that is identity. So again, for adding, it's adding 0, but multiplying is multiplying by 1. Identity property. Here we have 89 times 0 is equal to 0. That is the multiplicative of 0. The property multiplicative of 0. And then on these last two, notice it has parentheses. So the parentheses right here are grouping the 8 and the 4 and then adding the 5. But over here, we're grouping the 4 and the 5 and then adding the 8. That is the associative property. How do you spell associative? Associative. I teach math, guys, not English. Associative property. And then down here for number 7, same exact thing. The groupings were grouping 42 and 3. Over here, they're grouping the 2 and the 5. So this is, again, the associative property. And that is pretty much it for the properties. The most common ones y'all really need to focus on is the commutative property, associative property, and the distributive property. These are the ones you're going to see most often in 6th grade. Distribute, where you give whatever's outside to everything on the inside by multiplying. And then commutative, the numbers move. Associative, the parentheses move. All right. And then I did want to talk about the prime factorization really quickly. So prime factorization, we're going to find the prime factorization of 80 as a review. So to find the prime factorization, we need to make a factor tree. We also need to remember the first few prime numbers that we need to memorize. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, and 13. Now there are more numbers, but these are the most common ones you're going to see. Remember, prime means the only factors are the number 1 and then that number itself. So we need to pick any two factors. They don't have to be prime numbers. Any two numbers that multiply together to get me 80. Now there's a lot of options. You can use any of them. You just never want to use 1, because if I use 1, I'm going to put 80 again. It's pointless. This one's pretty easy. I'm going to use 10 and 8. Again, you could have used any other numbers that multiply together. 40 and 2, 20 and 4. It doesn't matter, as long as they multiply together to get 80. Now, neither one of these numbers are prime, so I have to break them both down. So I'm going to start with the number 10. So I'm going to do 2 more branches, and I need 2 numbers that multiply together to get 10. 5 and 2. And then now we notice that both of those numbers are prime, so we're going to circle them. Anytime you come to a prime number, we circle. And then I can break 8 down into 2 factors of 4 and 2. 2 is prime, so I circle it, but 4 is not. So I'm going to break that number down into 2 times 2. We're always breaking it into 2 factors that multiply together to get the number above it. So 5 and 2 make 10. 4 and 2 make 8, 10 and 8 make 80. So you can see the numbers beneath it, the 2 numbers beneath, always multiply together to get the number above it. Now that we're done, we've broken down every composite number that we could, and now we're left with prime numbers that we circled. We're going to take those prime numbers and we're going to list them in order from least to greatest. So I've only got 2s and 5. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 2s, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. So I put 4 of them, and then a 5. Now notice I am putting dots here for multiplication, because to get it, what I would do is I'd multiply all these together and I would get the number 80 in the end. I don't have to do that, but I could do it to check if I wanted to. And then now I'm going to write this using exponents. So my number being multiplied here is 2. That's my base number. My exponent is 1, 2, 3, 4, because it appeared 4 times. And then multiply by 5. Because there's just 1, I can just put 5. And that is your quick little review of prime factorization. If y'all have any questions or need help while you're working on the activity, please don't hesitate to contact me on Zoom. Y'all know I'm available. Just remember, you're taking the number, breaking it down to two factors that multiply together to get it. So in this case, 10 and 8. And then these were a composite, so I had to break them down until I was just down to prime numbers only. So every composite number, 10 got broken down, 8 got broken down, 4 got broken down. And once I got to prime numbers only, I could stop. Make sure you put them in order from least to greatest. Use exponents if you have them, and that is it. If y'all have any questions over anything, please don't hesitate to ask. Y'all have a great day, and I will talk to y'all soon. Bye, guys.